Welcome to the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, the podcast that introduces you to ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. My name is Barry Eustance, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Hi, everybody. It's Barry Eustance here again with the Just Great People podcast from the Success Consultancy. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Rick Leander, and we'll explain how that connection's been made. Rick's got an unbelievably stellar story and resume that he's going to talk us through. I'll ask intelligent questions if I can think of any. So over to you, Rick. Just if you could explain to our dear listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at the moment and how you got there.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, Barry, and thanks for the opportunity to have a conversation. This is great. My background, I think, is a little unusual. My father was a military officer. My mother was a school teacher, and we traveled constantly. We moved around a lot. And that's a piece of my DNA that has continued ever since. Most of my professional career was as a banker. I spent a lot of time in London, New York, and Tokyo, focusing primarily on technology and payments. Then did a little bit of a jog into the entrepreneurial world, but still under the auspices of a big bank. So I ran strategy for a strategic technology group, ran a large strategic investing fund, ran a new business incubator that did corporate challenges, and then was the CEO of a fintech that ended up being absorbed by a big insurance company. About 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, I met a guy by the name of Dan Ariely, who's become one of the leading experts in behavioral economics, and he really got me hooked on the topic. And so for much of the last 15 years, I've really been focused on entrepreneurs, working with both companies and entrepreneurial service organizations to help people create interesting companies and leveraging what Dan and others have taught me about behavioral economics. So it's been a great gig.
Yeah, and disclosure, I read Predictably Irrational, Dan's book, courtesy of Rick, and it's a must-read for anybody who wants to understand a little bit more about behavioral economics. When you talk about banking, you weren't sitting behind the desk there. You were CEO and managing director of some quite stellar names. Bank of America springs to mind, and BNY Mellon. How did you get into that, and how did you make that transition, Rick, from the corporate world to the entrepreneurial fintech startup environment and behavioral economics?
Yeah, my career has been anything other than a straight line. So it's not exactly chasing squirrels, but it's very much what looks interesting at the moment, and I should go away and do it. And I've been really fortunate to have some interesting opportunities. One of the things, and I say this only partially in jest, that after spending 30 years in the corporate banking world, I kind of felt like I'd sold my soul to the devil. So helping entrepreneurs who are working on solving really interesting problems that need to get solved is kind of one of the ways I'm trying to earn it back.
Right. And that journey through behavioral economics to where you are now, banking, work you're doing now, can you kind of expand upon that? Because it's kind of close to my heart, this sort of innovation, entrepreneurial environment. Can you kind of flesh that out a little bit? Because you're doing some amazing work there.
Yeah, it's really great stuff. First of all, I am working exclusively these days with mission-driven founders. So not the people who want to automate some process and put 30,000, middle-class people out of work, but people who are solving, medical problems and clean water problems and, a whole range of stuff like that. And we spend a lot of time with those companies using behavioral economics to help with things that you'd sort of think were natural fits, like how do we create messaging that's more effective, or how might we build a pricing model that works, or even things like product features and how might we create those. But we also spend a lot of time thinking about and helping people develop effective cultures, right? I mean, culture is really an important ingredient that a lot of entrepreneurs tend to not think about. And so getting them to be more specific about what's important and how they want to make decisions and how they want to treat people. It's clear that there are lots of models and lots of different models will work. But the work we do with founders is you need to pick one that's really close to the way you're wired yourself, and then find those people to come join you that are wired in similar ways that'll make the model work.
So that kind of starting with values initially, is that how it works? Is that you're engaging people with the similar values and you're being overt about those values?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a story about a guy that I met when I was with Bank of America years ago. He'd been a successful entrepreneur and was trying to figure out what he wanted to do next. And rather than think about what the business was going to be, he gathered a few of his friends over a weekend and they debated the kind of organization they wanted to be. What did they value? What was going to be important to them? And they put together a fairly short but very precise list of the things that were important to them as a group. And then they went away and tried to find a business that would allow them to be the company they wanted to be. And the guy was Charles Brewer, and he ended up creating MindSpring, which was one of the first really big internet service providers in the US back in the mid to late 90s. And I always thought that model was interesting, right? It was, these are the things that are important to me. These are the things I value. How do I be in business and show fidelity to those sets of values?
Fascinating. And actually well ahead of the game, I think there. It was, I mean, that was a time when the big work was being done by Kotter et al. On performance and culture during that period. And yet that was well ahead of that. Is that an approach you now recommend? What are your thoughts on it? How does that fit, do you think, with your current generation of entrepreneurs?
By the time they get to me, they've already identified something that they want to focus on. And most of the time, and in fact, it's one of the things we like to listen to early on in these engagements is, tell us what your origin story is, right? Why is this a problem you're interested in? Why is this a problem you want to help solve? And the ones that where this problem is very personal really then provides a foundation for, okay, so if that's what's important to you, if that's the problem you want to solve, let's talk about structures and the way to build an organization and a team that will help you solve that problem. I remember listening to a venture capital once talk about why she thought origin part stories were so important. And she said, smart people, if they're prepared to work hard, can always find some way to make money. And she said, dealing with somebody who's involved with doing X because they think it'll make them rich is not a great ground game for her, because tomorrow an opportunity that seems like it's more likely to generate money will pop up and the founder will go somewhere else. So she was like one of the people who really got me focusing in on what's the thing that grounds you as an individual to this particular problem, right? Convince me you're going to be around to actually see this through, because it's going to be long, it's going to be tough, it's going to be frustrating. Because frankly, that's another one of the things that we talk to our founders about, that there are 3 things we can absolutely guarantee will happen. And there's one thing we can guarantee is almost certainly not going to, right? The 3 things that are going to happen is you're going to end up with stress, probably more stress than you ever would have realized. You're going to end up at some point in this process having money problems and maybe getting right up to the edge of having nothing left. And it's going to screw up relationships. It might be with family, it might be with friends, it might be with employees or investors or clients, but your relationships are going to suffer. We know those 3 things happen consistently. The 4th thing, which we're almost positive is not going to happen, is you're not going to get rich, right? Yep. At least in the US, the odds are slightly better for entrepreneurs than they are for people buying lottery tickets, but the odds still are not good. And so do this because you've got a passion about it, not because you think it's a quick way to get rich, because it's not, and those other things are going to end up making you this.
Yeah, and quick ways to become sustainably rich are few and far between, are they not? I think we've seen the get rich quick schemes where suddenly people got poor very, very well, almost equally as quickly. if you're talking to the small, medium-sized organization or the aspiring entrepreneur, is that the place? Where is the place that you think they should start? Is it the origin story with the commitment to the values and working out from there? How is the Leander roadmap for getting this at least as right as possible?
Well, it depends on who the entrepreneur is talking to. So if they're talking to potential investors, the roadmap is define the problem crisply in a way that somebody not skilled in the particular topic will understand. Explain what your solution is once again, in ways that, somebody stupid like me can understand it. And then third, explain to me why your solution you think is going to be better than the 50 other solutions that somebody has pitched to me this week about this problem. Because there are very few problems in this world that somebody hasn't tried to solve. And usually it's multiple. A lot of the stuff we do is in the medical space, mostly medical devices. And there are thousands of people who've tried to fix a particular problem. And so explain to me what it is about your solution that's going to be different. If you're talking to potential teammates, it's a little bit of that, but it's particularly, I think, in today's workforce, what most people are searching for is a way to make a difference, right? And so, understanding the problem and the solution is important, but also being able to articulate, so where do you fit into this equation, right? What are the things I'm going to need from you? What are the things, where are the gaps that I need you to fill? So this team, we spend a fair amount of time on team building and looking at resources. And once again, it's why we think the conversation around culture is so important. I mean, I'm really good with little pieces of advice. And another piece of advice I give to our founders is you should strive to be the smartest person you can be and still be the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
Right? Surround yourself with stunningly smart people who are experts in the things that you're not good at. And some of them need to be really good at getting stuff done, right? I'm really good at thinking about stuff, but every job I've had that required running something, I've had a top flight or found a top flight COO to actually keep the trains running on time. Yeah.
I think that's also in the PE environment, something that's come out, that there's slow execution is actually a major issue with PE. I mean, that's pretty fundamental advice that you've given there. I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this are going to be sitting there with their fingers in their mouth going, I'm not sure I've thought of any of those. But essentially, am I right in thinking you're looking at, it's really identifying a fundamental market problem, the resolution to that, and the uniqueness of that resolution, the context of the market and the competition sitting out there, and then having a culture that is going to be able to deliver that to the marketplace satisfactorily, not only now, but way down the road, taking the point that we're not looking at the quick buck here, but actually the sustainable cash flows, the sustainable profitability of an organization. I mean, it's maybe the right thing to do is going to go and buy a lottery ticket. Only joking, folks. Only joking. It's not an easy gig, is it? It really isn't an easy gig. And I mean, you're looking here in the UK, I think within the first 12 months, it's something like 60% fail within the first 12 months because of those fundamentals. And the organizations you're dealing with are further down the time tunnel, aren't they? They tend to be.
They do tend to be, but I'll tell you that if I took a look at the whole portfolio, it's a wide range of stuff. So a couple of the entrepreneurial service organizations that I'm involved with are taking people at very early stages. Some of them haven't even written the idea down on a napkin, but they want to, they've got something that's kind of brewing in their heads potentially. And the first thing they want to do is, what's the mindset as an entrepreneur that I need, right? My sense is I'm going to need to think about things differently. I'm going to need different priorities. So we do a lot of work with very, very early stage organizations through incubators. There's an organization in Winston-Salem that I'm involved with, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, that I'm involved with, that calls itself a scalerator. It takes organizations that have begun to show some momentum, they've begun to show some traction in the marketplace, and they give them space, they give them mentors and formal training to really help them accelerate, once they've begun to get some traction. But a lot of the organizations we deal with don't have any traction at all. Some of them haven't raised any money yet. So it really is and of course, particularly in the early stages, it's like there are 1,000 things to worry about. So what do I worry about first? And so it's this sort of three-pronged model of what is it you're trying to do and why. And then think about the kind of person, the kind of company, the kind of business you want to build.
Yeah, and I think emphasizing the importance of that mentoring role and coaching role is perhaps something that may not have dawned to many on many founders and entrepreneurs. Give an example. Bill Campbell was mentoring and coaching Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt, the whole raft of the top rank Silicon Valley CEOs, all the way through their career. In fact, until Bill died in 2016. I think he's the only person who ever turned Steve Jobs' phone calls down, isn't he, when he was playing golf? The mentoring and the coaching is critically important. So we're building here, I think, a tool set, isn't it, for your emergent organization. It's those fundamentals, and then having the right team, including the mentors around you, and the right culture set. What else are we missing, Nick, Rick, before we take our newly founded organization live?
There almost certainly is something that's missing, but nothing jumps out at me. I think you've done a really good job of synthesizing this down. But I think the point of mentors and advisors is a really good one. And I think things have gotten a little better the last few years, but when we first started doing this kind of work, talking to people about what in effect were business coaches was not a very popular is the wrong word. It wasn't a topic that resonated with a lot of people. And the conversation I had with folks who are kind of struggling with this is, think about world-class athletes, right? This guy swims better, or this woman swims better than anybody else in the world has ever swum. And yet she surrounds herself by experts, right? Nutrition people and mechanics and all the rest of that stuff, because they're trying to get better. What makes you think that by yourself you can actually pull this stuff off, right? If the person who's the best, football player in the world is still looking for advice every day, shouldn't all of us in the field we're in be looking for people who can help make us better?
Absolutely, and a great point. And I think you've identified the bit we missed. Leave your ego at the door. You need help. You can't do this alone. And quite right. In fact, I had Simon Hartley, you may have seen Rick on the podcast, who was the Be World Class. And he was talking about how he coached people who were really not very stellar in some very simple, you've got to watch the podcast, folks. No giveaways. You could, the basics and 3 very simple areas of focus, which was, you have to read the podcast, you have to watch the podcast, but it was focus was one of them, confidence was the other, and motivation was the other. There you got it.
Yeah.
It's
well,
simple...
and the notion about being really clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish. The conversation he had about the swimmer that he worked with just blew me away, that they finally boiled it down to, what is it you're trying to do?
And it took them 3 years to achieve that
absolutely.
point.
People should listen to that. It was brilliant.
Yeah. So it's and we go on. I mean, the look at Ratilova had Billie Jean King as her coach, and Billie Jean King did some very simple stuff. She used to put tennis balls on the television and tennis balls on the worktop in the kitchen, so that Navratilova's focus was always on that ball. And the speed of the ball across the net actually slowed down as a result because her focus was there and it was constant focus. So, Rick, in terms of we've now got the essential elements. So your founders kicked in to play the organization. We've got culture, and they're starting to move. They're getting a little bit of traction. At what point do they come and see you and go, okay, we now need to take this to the next step? Where do you fit into this in terms of that journey?
Well, I'm probably already involved at some point. The companies that are much further along end up needing specific expertise around technical issues, right? So they've got to scale their technology platform. I quit scaling technology platforms 20 years ago. I wouldn't know where to start today. So let's go find them somebody who can help them navigate the various cloud applications and figure out what to do. Same thing with marketing, same thing with human resources or the next level of contracts. When they get to that stage, my role sort of morphs into the happy curmudgeon, the guy who's willing to sit beside the CEO and go, yeah, that's not a really good idea, right? People need somebody who will speak truth to them. And I'm really fortunate at this point in my career that I get to work with people that I like and trust and whose work I think is valuable. And I also have the freedom to look somebody in the eye and say, that's not at all what you should be doing. And more often than not, those conversations revolve less around specific business issues and more around culture issues. The number of times over the last few years where I've been involved with a company and a executive team who've got somebody in the organization who is filling a really important role but doesn't fit the culture, and they're struggling. The people who run the companies tend to struggle with this stuff, right? They know that they're toxic. They know that in the long run, and I would argue in the short to medium term, this person's causing a lot of damage. The fact that they're their chief programmer or their top salesperson or whatever it is really puts them in a bind of having to go, do I care about the short-term business impact of getting rid of this person, or do I care more about the long-term impact on the organization if I keep somebody around who clearly isn't showing fidelity with the culture? So I often get, we used to refer to me inside the organization as the couples counselor, right? The guy who would sit down and try and figure out some way to navigate this stuff. But at the end of the day, and I didn't come up with this term, a CEO that I worked with came up with the term. He said, I know who our internal terrorists are. I'm just not sure what to do with them. And I said,
sorry, go ahead.
No. And I said, if they were an external terrorist and you were a policeman or in the military, you'd know what to do. The stuff hasn't changed. So my advice to the CEO with the internal terrorists is find one of them you're absolutely convinced and publicly get rid of them.
Yeah.
And, because the people you need to worry about are the people, not those folks, because you'll never convince them. But you got a bunch of people sitting on the fence looking to see if you're serious about your vision, if you're serious about your mission, if you're serious about the things you say you value. And if your actions don't reflect the posters that are on the wall, you're going to be in big trouble, I think, sooner than a lot of these folks realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, fantastic advice. And we didn't even have time to drink coffee. We came here to drink coffee. Fantastic. Rick, can we pick this up again? Because there's more to come. And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to gain a mass amount of value from this conversation and the ones we're going to have soon.
You're very kind, but yes, I would be glad to continue this, particularly this issue of ego, because I talk a lot to my founders about being humble and having some reality about how much responsibility you actually have for whatever success you.
Yeah.
So yes, I'd be glad to continue this.
Fantastic. Well, listen, you've now got Rick's formula. We've added to that ego and the fundamentals from Simon Hartley. So this is turning out to be a very valuable session. We're going to speak to Rick again. Rick, thank you so much. I know you've got some international travel booked. So that's it from the Success Consultancy Just Great People podcast. Rick's details will be in the link, how to contact Rick, his website. And Rick, we look forward to speaking to you again very, very soon. I'm looking forward to speaking to you again next Thursday when we speak on Strat Chat, which is where we met folks. So from Rick Leander and from me, thank you very much. We'll see you again on another podcast soon. Rick, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Appreciate it.
And before we go, just a reminder, please do like, do share, and please do subscribe to this podcast and ensure that you pass it on to everybody you know. So that's it for today's Just Great People podcast from the Success Consultancy. We hope and trust you've enjoyed it. Please join us next time, and please do remember to subscribe. Thanks for joining us.